The original strategy was simple. Before the war escalated, the Calix Empire managed to capture the prince of their enemy nation. Rather than mistreat him, they chose to offer hospitality, using his presence to track the enemy's movements. The plan was to pressure the Dorsan Empire into surrendering without further bloodshed, hoping that diplomacy and leverage would lead to a peaceful resolution. That vision of a clean, bloodless victory was the dream Theodora Calix once held. Dressed in elegance, she stood with quiet resolve, imagining a future shaped by strategy, not war. But then, Theodore Dorsan, the prince of the enemy empire, reached for her hand and whispered that she was all he had left. His words carried desperation, and the moment between them was charged with something far more personal than politics. Gripping her hand tightly, Theodore begged her not to leave him behind. His voice trembled with fear and longing, but for Theodora, the weight of his words only deepened the storm inside her. She knew then that things were spiraling out of control. This wasn't just about nations anymore. This was bad. Two great empires stood at odds, Calix and Dorsan. Their leaders, Theodora Calix and Theodore Dorsan, faced one another not just as sovereigns, but as symbols of a fragile peace teetering on the edge of collapse. The two empires shared a long and bitter border, one that had fueled countless petty skirmishes. Resources were drained, lives disrupted, and even the common folk, like farmers, found themselves caught in the crossfire. Among them was Theodore Dorsan, who once toiled in the fields, far removed from the politics that would soon consume him. To end the cycle of conflict, Princess Theodora Calix and Emperor Lilian Lucerne Dorsan devised a bold solution, a political marriage. Their union was meant to be a symbol of unity, a bridge between two warring nations. As they rode through the capital in celebration, hope bloomed across the continent. At first, the marriage seemed to be working. But on the very day they were wed, tragedy struck. Cassandra and Lilian were assassinated in cold blood. Their wedding portrait, once a symbol of peace, lay shattered and soaked in blood. Any hope for unity died with them. When Theodora Calix confirmed her sister's death, she collapsed in grief. For 3 days, she mourned in silence, her heart breaking beside Cassandra's lifeless body. Then, with fire in her eyes and rage in her voice, she made a vow to drown the continent in blood if that's what it took to avenge her sister. With fury burning through her veins, Theodora screamed that she would spill the blood of those responsible. That day, she officially declared war on the Dorsan Empire. Clad in armor and bearing the Calix banner, Theodora led her forces onto the battlefield. Her declaration of war had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished. And thus, it began. 5 years passed. The war raged on without mercy. Theodore Dorsan, no longer the Prince of Peace, now rode at the head of Dorsan's forces, hardened by years of bloodshed. As the battle flared again, Calix soldiers shouted that their princess was leading the charge. Theodora rode straight into the fray, sword raised, cursing the Dorsan forces with every breath. Her fury had not dulled in 5 years, it had only sharpened. With a cry that echoed across the field, Theodora slashed through the enemy ranks and declared that today would be the day the war ended. As lightning crackled overhead, she fixed her gaze on one man, Theodore Dorsan. Facing him at last, she shouted that today she would take his head. Magic surged between them, lightning splitting the sky as the two former allies prepared to clash as enemies. Their blades met with a thunderous crash, magical energy exploding around them. Mounted on horseback and locked in combat, Theodora and Theodore fought with everything they had, the storm above mirroring the chaos between them. As the magical storm intensified, Theodora's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected this level of power. Her soldiers called out to her in alarm, but she could barely hear them over the roar of magic. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Theodore narrowed his eyes, thinking to himself that if he could just push a little further, he could kill his opponent. Blood hung in the air, mingling with the magic, as he prepared to strike the fatal blow. Then, everything went dark. Theodora's consciousness drifted through the void until a faint light appeared, a throne, distant and glowing. She moved toward it, unsure if she was alive or dead. She found herself in a place unlike any battlefield. Surrounded by light and silence, Theodora stood before a figure with silver hair and golden eyes. The being calmly told her this was the afterlife. The man explained that she had just died and ended up here. Shocked, Theodora's mind reeled. What the hell was going on? She demanded to know who he was. He introduced himself as Valois, a god who governs the present and time. Alongside him were 2 others, Vangoth, god of the past and death, and Balad, god of the future and dimensions. Together they ruled the flow of existence. Valois repeated that he oversees the present and time. Theodora, still trying to make sense of it, asked if there had been some kind of mistake. Valois responded coolly, "Gods don't make mistakes." Valois pointed to an image and called her Marin Bell, saying she had died from a spear to the heart. But Theodora firmly corrected him. Her name was Theodora Calix. Valois, unfazed, continued calling her Marin. Confusion and tension grew. Valois finally admitted they had brought the wrong person. Outraged, Theodora demanded to be sent back immediately, explaining she had vanished in the middle of battle. But Valois shook his head. Returning her wasn't possible. Instead, as an apology, he offered her a place in heaven. Theodora Calix spins around, her voice cracking as she cries out for them to wait. Panic surges through her. As the reality of her situation crashes down, this wasn't how her story was supposed to end. Her mind reels with resistance, and the thought explodes inside her like a spark against dry wood. She can't die like this. Not here. Not now. As Valois prepares to summon the next soul, Theodora explodes with fury, calling him a scammer. Her voice cuts through the divine air as she threatens to expose everything, to tell the other gods that he dragged the wrong soul into the afterlife and killed her. Valois, caught off guard, raises a hand and urges her to stop, but her defiance is already out in the open. Valois groans, muttering that bringing someone back from the dead is no simple task, and the paperwork alone spans countless pages. Theodora dashes off, determined to escalate the issue. Cornered, Valois throws up his hands and relents, shouting that he'll do it but only if she swears to keep this mistake a secret for the rest of her life. She stops and accepts without hesitation. Deal. Valois exhales heavily, his body glowing as divine energy gathers around him. Light spirals upward, swirling with the weight of cosmic power as he begins the resurrection ritual. As the magic stabilizes, he points calmly toward a glowing doorway and tells Theodora to exit through the door on the left. Theodora pauses at the threshold, confused by how simple the exit seems. Just walk out? After everything? Her mind flashes back to the chaos, the spear, the battlefield. But then her focus sharpens. She clenches her fist and whispers a name, Theodora Dorzan. This time, she swears, she'll finish what was started. With her cape fluttering and eyes fixed forward, Theodora marches through the divine mist. Her vow rings clear, she will end this, once and for all. Just wait, Theodora Dorzan. She's coming back, and this time, she won't fail. As she vanishes through the portal, Theodora mutters one final promise. She'll slit his throat. Valois exhales, brushing his hair back with relief. Finally, the nuisance is gone. He decides to keep the whole incident quiet. No need to inform the higher gods if the problem resolved itself. Valois turns back to his duties, ready to summon the next soul. But something nags at him. He pauses, puzzled, and glances toward the doors. With a frown, he asks his assistant which way that woman went just now. The assistant blinks and asks if Valois meant left from his perspective or hers. The two stare at the identical doors, each labeled left, depending on where you stand. Realization dawns in comedic horror. They may have just sent her through the wrong door again. Valois grabs his head and screams in frustration. This is big trouble. Very big trouble. As the divine realm fades, the scene transitions to a grand palace bathed in sunlight, the Calix imperial castle. Theodora jolts upright in bed, blinking at the soft sheets and warm light. She whispers, asking if she's really back. Her thoughts race. What kind of ordeal was that? But if she's truly returned, then she needs to get back to the battlefield immediately. As she shifts, her eyes land on the figure beside her. Her breath catches. There, lying next to her in the same bed, is Theodora Dorzan. Her mind reels. What is he doing here? Theodora remains asleep, unaware of the storm brewing beside him. Theodora backs away, clutching her head. Was she dragged here while unconscious? Why would she be in bed with him of all people? She glances at the mirror and freezes. Something is definitely wrong, she gasps, staring at the frilly dress she's wearing. What on earth is this outfit? Her reflection stares back, young, unfamiliar. She barely recognizes herself. How did she become so youthful? Behind her, Theodore stirs and sits up, groggily asking who's there. Theodore rubs his eyes and lets out a dry laugh. Her again? He reminds her that just yesterday she ran up and hugged him out of nowhere, and now she's gone as far as sneaking into his bedroom. Theodora stands speechless, unable to process what he's saying. He crosses his arms and tells her she truly has no sense of shame. Theodora blurts out a confused, "Me?" as he lists her supposed offenses, tripping in front of him and injuring an attendant, begging him to escort her until she sprained her ankle. None of it sounds like her. Still reeling from the accusations, Theodora tries to make sense of the situation. She looks him in the eye and asks what he plans to do with her. Theodore blinks, caught off guard, and responds with a simple, "Huh." He calmly says he understands her anger and asks if she's planning to kill him. Then, without flinching, he adds that he would never do such a thing. Theodora's mind spirals. What does that mean? Is he going to torture her instead? Their faces are inches apart when an attendant bursts in, cheerfully greeting them. "Good morning, Your Majesty. Time to wake up." Theodora instinctively steps back, her mind spinning even faster now. The attendant freezes, stunned to see Princess Theodora here. As her legs give out, she falls into Theodore's arms. The attendant gasps, jumping to conclusions. Theodore flails, trying to explain it's not what it looks like. Theodora bolts away, and Theodore sighs. Thanks to her, things just got a lot more complicated. Theodora calls out that she's not the only one annoyed here. Before she can respond, another voice cuts through the hall, shouting her full name, Theodora Calix. She winces. What now? Her eyes widen as she sees the source of the voice. It's her sister, Theodora Calix. Alive, standing, and yelling. Theodora's thoughts freeze. This can't be happening. She remembers it clearly. Cassandra died 5 years ago, bleeding out in her arms, yet here she is. Theodora whispers her name, then grabs her head in disbelief. Am I crazy? She slaps herself, hoping it's a dream, but the sting is real. Cassandra scolds her for acting like a fool, saying an imperial princess shouldn't behave this way. Theodora stares at her, overwhelmed. Are you really my sister? You're alive? You're not undead, right? Cassandra raises a fist in cartoonish rage, saying Theodora clearly hasn't been hit enough. A calm voice interrupts. Cassie, calm down. Theodora steps in, assuring her that Theodora is reflecting too. As Theodora lifts her eyes, she freezes again. That man, it's Lillian Lucerne Dorzen. Lillian Lucerne Dorzen smiles and calls out proudly, asking if he did well, addressing Cassandra as his sister. In law. Theodora stares at him in disbelief. That face, that name, it's unmistakable. He's the Dorzen Emperor who died alongside her sister on their wedding day. Yet here he is, alive and smiling. Cassandra breaks down, blaming herself for everything. She says it's all her fault, that she couldn't fill the void left by their parents. Lillian gently interrupts herself. Blame. Telling her that none of that is true. Cassandra looks up as Lillian gently wipes her tears, his voice soft as he tells her she's doing perfectly well. She calls him Lily with affection, leaning into his touch. Theodora watches the scene unfold, completely stunned. Her mind races as she tries to process what she's seeing. Her sister is alive. Lillian is alive. And they're together. What the hell is going on? Cassandra and Lillian stand side by side, smiling as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Theodora stares at them, her thoughts spiraling. How is her sister alive? And who exactly is this man flirting so casually with her? Her gaze shifts to Theodora Dorzen, who stands nearby looking just as smug. Theodora clenches her fists, overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. Both of them are infuriating. Theodora narrows her eyes, her instinct screaming that something is deeply wrong. None of this adds up. Her sister's resurrection, the presence of the dead emperor, the warmth of a family that should be broken. She decides there's only one way to get answers. She has to meet that god again, Valois or whatever he is. Without hesitation, she slips out of the room and into the moonlit halls of Calix Imperial Castle. Standing beneath the vast night sky, Theodora steps onto the castle balcony. The moonlight washes over her as she looks up, her thoughts focused and sharp. What really happened? Why is she here? She clenches her fists. There's only one being who might know the truth. She must speak to Valois again, no matter what it takes. 5 years earlier, on the day before Cassandra was to leave for Dorzen, the Calix Imperial Castle stood bathed in sunlight. The air was filled with anticipation and quiet unease as the family prepared for her departure. In the castle courtyard, Cassandra stood beside her attendant, as carriages and guards readied for her journey. The man beside her asked if she truly wasn't going with her sister. Cassandra didn't answer right away, her gaze drifting toward the castle windows. The name hangs in the air. Princess Theodora. Inside the castle, Theodora sat quietly on a bench, her posture stiff. Cassandra looked up at her from the garden below, their eyes meeting across the distance. The younger sister gave a simple answer, yeah. A quiet moment passed between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. Theodora stepped forward and grabbed Cassandra by the collar, her voice shaking with emotion. She couldn't believe her sister had agreed to a political marriage just to secure peace with Dorzen. She shouted that her sister was an idiot. Her words echoed through the room, but what lingered longer was the pain behind them. That must have hurt her more than she let on. Cassandra smiled brightly and leaned out the window, calling out to her younger sister. Theodora looked up in surprise. Cassandra shouted that she would have a good wedding and come back. Her voice was full of hope, as if nothing could go wrong. With a gentle smile, Cassandra told her sister to try and let go of her frustration. At least until they met again. Her gloved hands framed her face as she spoke, her voice carrying through the air. Below, Theodora listened silently, her heart caught between anger and longing. Cassandra raised her hands in farewell and told them all to meet again with a smile. Her voice was bright, but her eyes shimmered with something deeper. The attendant beside her bowed slightly and reassured her that everything would be okay now. She nodded, trying to believe him. Cassandra thought about her sister. Theodora was always the one who listened, sometimes too well. Tears welled in her eyes as she remembered the day she stood over her sister's coffin, whispering for her to come back. Her voice cracked as she added, with a smile. The promise they made was never fulfilled. Theodora had died, and that should have been the end. But after coming back to life, she saw her sister again, alive, radiant, and smiling as if nothing had happened. It was surreal. Seeing Cassandra alive filled Theodora with joy, but the unease never left her. Something about this world felt off. She needed to know what was going on. Standing on the balcony, she decided to confront Valois, the god who brought her here. Looking up at the moonlit sky, Theodora called out to Valois, asking if he was watching. If the human he saved were to die again in this world, wouldn't he be curious what would happen? Her voice was steady, but her challenge was clear. She gave him one last warning. She would count to 3, and he had better show himself while she was still being nice. 1, 2, 3. The silence that followed was deafening. Theodora stepped onto the balcony ledge, her bare feet hovering over the drop. Just as she leaned forward, a voice rang out, Valois shouting at her. "You idiot!" In an instant, Valois appeared and caught her in his arms, pulling her back from the edge. Theodora smiled, saying she knew he'd show up. He held her tightly and asked what would have happened if he hadn't. Valois set her down gently and admitted that she would have been in serious trouble if he hadn't shown up. He apologized, explaining that he hadn't fully explained things before. She had crossed into another world. Theodora blinked in confusion. Another world? Valois nodded. One where she had chosen to attend Cassandra's wedding. Valois explained that human life is filled with crucial moments, choices that shape destiny. The moment a choice is made, the world splits in two. Theodora listened, absorbing every word. The moment a decision is made, Valois continued, the world splits in two. One path continues as before, and the other diverges completely. Theodora stood in armor, a symbol of the path she had unknowingly taken. Valois elaborated. One world continues with the original version of Theodora, while another branches off, entirely different. Occasionally, by pure chance, the flow of both worlds aligns, and that's when Theodora jumped into the flow. Normally, the door she passed through shouldn't have opened. It was a fluke, a broken rule in the system. But if the cycle aligns again, she can return to her original world. Valois smirked and told her she was smarter than she looked. Theodora crossed her arms and asked the obvious question, when's the next cycle? Valois paused, calculating in human time. She guessed 10 hours. He shook his head. Then she tried 10 days. Still no, the answer was going to be worse than she expected. Valois casually shuts down Theodora Calix's hopeful guess, leaving her stunned. She repeats the number in disbelief. 10 years. 10 years trapped in this world, far from everything she knew. Valois confirms it without hesitation, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Theodora stands frozen on the balcony of Calix Imperial Castle, trying to comprehend the weight of that number. Overwhelmed by the reality of a decade-long sentence in a foreign world, Theodora mutters that she might as well die and reincarnate. She storms toward the edge of the balcony, prompting Valois to jump up in alarm and yell for her to stop. Trying to calm her, he urges her to consider the bright side. Her sister is alive again, all thanks to her. Theodora halts, her back still turned, the reminder hitting her harder than she expected. Valois gently reminds her that no one else could have saved her sister, only Theodora had the will and timing to make it happen. He smiles, calling that a beautiful truth, and suggests she simply behave until the next cycle comes. But Theodora doesn't accept that. She crosses her arms and firmly says no. Waiting quietly for 10 years isn't in her nature. Theodora brushes off his attempt to pacify her, saying that saving her sister is a separate issue. She turns and declares that since all of this chaos was caused by Valois, it's only fair he compensate her. Valois blinks in confusion, not expecting a demand for repayment. But Theodora is serious. She wants proper compensation for the damage done. Valois stammers, caught off guard by the idea of compensation. Theodora steps closer, her tone cool and calculated. Since he's a god who governs time, she muses, surely he can offer something worthwhile. She raises her hand slowly, about to name her price. With unwavering confidence, Theodora finally states her demand. She wants the power to stop time. Her eyes gleam with determination as she stares down the god who disrupted her life, daring him to refuse. Theodora presses her request again, asking Valois to grant her the ability to stop time. He hesitates, unsure if she's serious. She doesn't flinch. If he refuses, she says she'll jump. Valois sighs, realizing she's not bluffing. Valois finally relents. He admits he shares some of the blame for her predicament and agrees to lend her his authority, temporarily. As he speaks, divine energy swirls around Theodora, lifting her into the air as the power begins to take root within her. Theodora descends gently, the magical light fading around her. She leans back on the balcony and immediately questions Valois. Did he actually give her the power to stop time? He nods casually, as if it were obvious. Of course he did. Did she think he was lying? Valois clarifies that while she now holds the power, it comes with a catch. The duration is extremely limited. Theodora frowns, asking how short. He raises a few fingers without answering. She guesses 30 minutes, hopeful, but unsure. Her optimism crashes when Valois confirms her guess, 30 seconds. She stares at him in disbelief and lowers her estimate to 3 seconds, hoping she's wrong. But he grins and confirms again. 3 seconds. That's all she gets. Theodora can't believe she negotiated with a god and ended up with a glorified blink. Determined to make the most of her time in this world, Theodora throws herself into training. She swings her sword at practice dummies with all the strength she can muster, but her body quickly betrays her. Gasping for breath, she curses her own weakness. Her hands tremble as she grips the sword tighter. This damned body, she thinks. Ever since her encounter with Valois, the need to grow stronger has consumed her. She refuses to remain helpless and resolves to change that, starting now. If she's stuck here for 10 years, Theodora decides she'll use that time to protect her sister, Theodora Calix. She doesn't need to become a soldier, but she can't afford to stay weak either. She sets a modest goal, to get her body into a decently toned state. As she trains, Theodora Dorzen watches her from a distance, silently observing her effort. Theodora steps forward and respectfully addresses her as Your Highness. Theodora pauses mid-swing and turns to face him. A group of maids gathers nearby, and Theodora informs her that His Majesty the Emperor is looking for her. In the Garden Tea Pavilion, Lilian Lucerne Dorzen waits in full imperial attire. As Theodora approaches, he greets her with a formal flourish, calling her the Son of the Empire. He gestures for her to sit and asks how life has been in Dorzen. Theodora thanks him for his care, saying things have been fine. Lilian smiles, pleased to hear it. He leans forward slightly, ready to explain, but he quickly shifts the tone, asking what prompted her to call him here privately. Lilian finally reveals his reason. He wants to get along with Theodora. Since they'll be family soon, he hopes they can open up to each other. Theodora tenses at his words. He admits he's not the most trustworthy person, but he wants a chance to change that. Lilian offers a gentle smile, trying to appear sincere. He's clearly making an effort to bridge the distance between them, hoping his words and expression will earn her trust. In a haunting memory, Lilian's voice echoes. He says he truly loves Cassandra and begs Theodora for just one chance. He promises he'll make her sister happy. Theodora remains silent, her eyes unreadable, but the memory lingers like a stain. Lilian tries to extend his promise to Theodora too, saying he'll make her happy as well, but she cuts him off coldly. He couldn't even prevent her sister's death. What makes him think he could ever bring her happiness? Theodora leans forward and tells him she'll remember his words about making her sister happy. Whether that's even possible, she doesn't know. She stands, turns her back to him, and walks away without another word. As she walks through the garden, Theodora suddenly bumps into someone. She looks up and finds herself face to face with Theodore Dorzen. He stands there in uniform, calm and unreadable. Theodora groans internally at the sight of him, annoyed by his presence. Before she can say anything, Theodora grabs her hand and tells her to come with him. She protests, confused and irritated, but he doesn't stop. Without explaining, he leads her away. They arrive at the same tea pavilion where she had just spoken with Lilian. Theodora narrows her eyes, recognizing the place immediately. She wonders if Theodore is siding with his brother, trying to guilt her into something. Suspicion flares in her chest as she glares at him. As Theodora watches from a distance, her gaze lands on the couple seated at the tea pavilion, Lilian Lucerne Dorzen and her sister Theodora Calix. Lilian gently calls out their names, his voice soft with affection. Cassandra leans into him, her expression warm, but her voice carries a hint of concern as she admits that Theodora seems angry with him. Lilian wraps an arm around her and assures her it's all right. Theodora just needs more time to adjust. Lilian smiles and tells Cassandra not to worry, Theodora will come around eventually. She just needs time. But Cassandra isn't convinced. What if Theodora never accepts her? Lilian leans closer, promising that next time, he'll stay by her side so she won't feel alone. He declares that with her beside him, he feels invincible. From a distance, Theodora watches them in silence, her expression unreadable. As Theodore Dorzen walks beside Theodora through the palace gardens, he mentions he heard the marriage was political. She asks if he believes that. He shrugs, saying it might just be for show. Meanwhile, Lilian and Cassandra share a joyful moment nearby. Theodora notes that not everyone is pleased with the peace treaty this marriage represents. But Theodora quietly replies that she doesn't see it that way. Theodore glances toward his brother and watches him smile beside Cassandra. He quietly admits that the Lilian he knows isn't someone who could fake a smile like that. As he and Theodora continue walking, the thought lingers, maybe this marriage means more than politics after all. Cassandra, still glowing from the warmth of Lilian's presence, remarks aloud that from what she can tell, the Empress seems unchanged. Theodora listens quietly, her eyes fixed on her sister, unsure if that's a comfort or a warning. Lilian turns to Theodora and asks with a gentle smile if the couple before her really looks unhappy. Cassandra laughs beside him, her hand resting on his arm. From above, the tea pavilion glows in the sunlight, a picture of peace, at least on the surface. As they walk along the garden path, Theodore admits he doesn't know what exactly has made her so angry, but if it's something he did, then he's sorry. Theodora turns away from him, arms crossed, but his words linger. He urges her to stop focusing on the scenery around her and instead look at what truly matters. Theodora's advice echoes in Theodora's mind, look at the center, not the background. Her eyes settle on Cassandra and Lilian, standing close, smiling gently. She realizes she's been focusing on everything around them, not on them. Cassandra turns and softly thanks her, her voice filled with sincerity. Theodora blinks in surprise as Theodora speaks up. She says that thanks to him, she finally understands what she's been missing. Her voice is calm, but her words carry weight. For the first time, she sees what truly matters. Theodora stands quietly as Cassandra and Lilian prepare for their wedding. The ceremony is about to begin. Below, a crowd gathers in celebration, unaware of the danger looming beneath the surface. Today is the wedding day. Disguised in a cloak, Theodora pushes through the crowd. There are too many people. But she reminds herself, stopping the assassination is the priority. She remembers the assassins from before, the ones with tattoos running down their arms and scars they didn't even try to hide. That's how she'll find them. A figure steps into her path. Theodora stiffens as a hooded man leans in and calls her Little Miss. His tone is casual, but her instincts scream danger. She looks up, startled, heart racing. The hooded man smiles and asks if she's all right. He tells her to be careful, especially in a crowd like this. His hand brushes her arm, and Theodora feels a chill crawl up her spine. His voice is too smooth, too calm. Something's wrong. Another hooded figure calls out, telling the first to hurry. The man nods, then turns back to Theodora with a smirk, telling her once more to be careful. As he walks away, the sleeve of his cloak shifts, revealing the unmistakable tattoo curling down his arm. Her suspicions are confirmed. Scars and tattoos. There's no doubt now, those are the assassins. Theodora steels herself to follow them, to stop them before it's too late. But just as she moves, a hand grabs her shoulder, and a voice calls her name, Princess Theodora. Theodora jumps back, startled to see her. He asks what she's doing here. Theodora hesitates, then realizes this is her chance. She grabs his arm and tells him the truth. There are people here trying to ruin the wedding. They have to act now. Theodora looks at her, confused. What did she say? Theodora insists it's true, she just ran into them. She overheard everything. They're planning to kill the imperial couple the moment the ceremony begins. Theodora clutches his sleeve, her voice trembling. Her sister and brother, in-law, are in danger. She begs him to help. He's the only one she can trust. Theodora hesitates, then nods. The ceremony is about to start. They need to move quickly. Theodora calls out in frustration, but Theodora keeps walking. Inside the palace, Cassandra and Lillian prepare for the ceremony, unaware of the danger approaching. Theodora follows, her heart pounding. She leans against the wall, her mind racing. What now? She made a promise to stop this, but she's done nothing. No one believes her. There's only one way left now. She'll have to act herself. She remembers the moment, the blade flying through the air. She has to stop it before it happens. Cassandra notices her distant expression and asks if she's feeling sick. Theodora forces a smile, brushing off the concern. Theodora straightens and tells Cassandra not to worry about her. She'll worry about her sister instead. Cassandra laughs, teasing her gently. Then Theodora turns to Lillian and calls him brother-in-law. She asks him to take good care of her sister. He blinks in surprise, then nods. Lillian grins and tells her to trust him. Theodora watches them both and thinks, can she really trust him? Cassandra turns to her and asks if she's ready. Theodora nods. Yes, she's ready. The crowd erupts in cheers as the couple steps forward. Cassandra and Lillian stand hand in hand, facing the people. Voices rise in unison, wishing happiness to the Emperor and Empress. Flags wave high as the people shout with joy. May both kingdoms be filled with peace and prosperity. Cassandra and Lillian smile and wave, radiant in their wedding attire. The moment is beautiful, but Theodora knows it's not over yet. As cheers echo through the Calix imperial castle, Cassandra and Lillian step forward, radiant in their union. Behind them, Theodore Dorzen stands tall, his gaze steady. But Theodora Calix remains apart, her focus sharp. She watches the crowd below, her golden eyes narrowing. Just as she feared, the moment has arrived. They're going to execute their plan. Theodora scans the plaza and immediately notices something off. There are far too many soldiers stationed around the perimeter. Her instincts scream that this isn't just for ceremonial security. Standing beside Theodore, she wonders if this overwhelming presence is a precaution or a sign that someone already suspects the danger. Could it be that someone else knows what's coming? Theodore turns away, seemingly unconcerned, but Theodora watches him closely. He didn't even pretend to listen. Maybe she won't need to intervene after all. But then, a scream pierces the air. Panic erupts as people scatter. Down below, a cloaked figure steps forward, blade drawn. The assassin is already in motion. Theodora's worst fears are confirmed. The assassin channels dark energy into his blade, the weapon glowing with violet magic. With a violent thrust, the sword is launched toward the stage, cutting through the air like a curse. The crowd gasps as the deadly arc streaks toward its target. Theodora watches the trajectory and moves instantly, urgency flooding her voice. She has to act, quickly. A voice shouts above the chaos, commanding the guards to protect the princess. Cassandra Calix stands stunned, her eyes locked on the incoming blade. The magical weapon hurtles toward her, and in that split second, the danger becomes all too real. The assassins make their intent clear. Cassandra is their primary target. The bride gasps, paralyzed by fear as the enchanted blade closes in. But before it can strike, Theodora throws herself forward, shouting for her sister. She won't let this wedding end in blood. Cassandra cries out in shock as Theodora takes the hit meant for her. Blood stains her uniform, but she doesn't falter. The pain is sharp, but the danger isn't over. Hidden in the shadows, another assassin prepares for a second strike, drawing a new weapon with deadly intent. This attack isn't finished yet. From a hidden vantage point, a second assassin looses an arrow aimed directly at Lillian. Theodora sees it instantly and bolts forward. Cassandra and Theodore freeze in horror, but Theodora doesn't hesitate. She has to stop it. She has to protect him. Cassandra screams her name as she races toward the path of the arrow. Lillian sees the arrow coming and instinctively braces himself, but he knows he won't be fast enough. Theodora sprints across the stage, her focus locked on the projectile. One more step. If she can just reach it in time, she might be able to change the outcome. Theodora stretches out her hand, desperation written across her face. The arrow speeds toward Lillian's chest, and she's just inches away. Please, she thinks, let her reach him before it's too late. With a cry that echoes across the plaza, Theodora shouts for time itself to stop. And it does. The entire world freezes in place. She gasps, stunned. The arrow hangs motionless in the air. Time really stopped. Somehow, she did it. Standing in the frozen moment, Theodora calculates her next move. The gap between Lillian and the arrow is too narrow. There's no room for error. She positions herself directly in its path. If she has to, she'll use her own body to stop it. Please, she thinks. Let this work. Time snaps back into motion. The crowd erupts and screams as the arrow flies forward. Theodora takes the full force of the strike, shielding Lillian with her body. Pain surges through her, but she doesn't let go. Her mission is clear: protect him at all costs. Lillian immediately turns to her, asking if she's hurt. Theodora offers a weak smile and says she's fine, thanks to him. But internally, she knows the wound is serious. She glances at the arrow on the ground and steadies herself. This side is handled. Now they need to find the ones responsible. She points toward the plaza, identifying 2 suspects, one near the fountain, the other by the pillar. She orders the soldiers to capture them alive. They need answers. Someone gave the order, and she intends to find out who. The soldiers nod and move swiftly to obey. As Theodora turns back to the couple, Cassandra gasps. Blood is dripping onto the floor. She asks if her sister is hurt. Theodora looks down and realizes the blood is hers, from the moment she shielded Lillian. The wound is worse than she thought. Theodora winces, her hand pressed to the wound. Lillian urges her to get treated and suggests they pause the ceremony. But she shakes her head firmly. That's not acceptable. Not when so much is at stake. But she stands firm. The ceremony must go on. It took years of planning to bring this wedding to life. If they stop now, who knows when they'll get another chance. Theodora knows this, and despite her injury, she insists they continue. Lillian protests, pointing out that she's hurt. She brushes off his concern, insisting it's nothing serious. Lillian stares at her, incredulous. How can she say that after what just happened? But she doesn't waver. Her resolve is unshakable. Facing the crowd, Theodora declares that there are more important things than her injury. She reminds Lillian of his promise, to lead both empires into peace. The people need reassurance. He must complete the marriage and show them that unity still stands strong. Then she turns to Lillian and adds one more thing. He needs to make her sister happy. Cassandra looks at her, eyes wide with emotion. Theodora smiles gently, repeating the word. Right? Her sister's happiness matters most. Cassandra rushes forward and throws her arms around Theodora, calling her name. She thanks her for protecting them, for shielding both her and Lillian. Her voice trembles with gratitude. Theodora is taken aback, but deeply moved. Theodora takes a breath, then urges the couple to go greet the crowd. They need to show strength now. Lillian hesitates, but Theodora steps forward and offers to take care of Cassandra. Theodora nods, then turns to him with a serious question. What happened to the perpetrators? Theodora explains that the attackers were captured by soldiers stationed in the plaza. Their foresight paid off. Theodora smirks, teasing him. She told him so. The moment lightens slightly, and the narration confirms that after this brief disturbance, the ceremony will resume. Inside the palace, attendants gather around Theodora, preparing to treat her wound. One informs her they'll need to cut her uniform to access the injury. She nods and thanks them. Then Theodore speaks softly, calling her name. She turns, surprised by the weight in his voice. Theodore Dorzen lowers his head and apologizes to Theodora Calix. He admits that if he had trusted her from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Taking full responsibility for the incident, he declares that the fault lies entirely with him. His voice is steady, but the weight of his regret is clear. Theodora raises an eyebrow, surprised by the rare sight of Theodore apologizing. She teases him, calling him the great Theodore Dorzen, and says that as long as he realizes it now, that's what matters. But just as she speaks, something shifts inside her. Her smile fades as a strange sensation begins to stir in her chest, something unfamiliar and alarming. A sharp twist grips Theodora's chest, as if her heart itself is being pulled apart. She leans into Theodore for support, her body trembling. Through clenched teeth, she tells him he can ask anything of her, except to call off the wedding. But her voice falters as the pain intensifies, and she stumbles back, stunned by the sudden surge within her. Theodore's vision blurs as he watches Theodora collapse before him. Panic erupts in the room. He shouts for help as attendants rush to her side. One urgently calls for the royal physicians. Despite the chaos, the ceremonial proceedings continue in the background, unaware that the princess has fallen unconscious in the very heart of the palace. The crowd outside erupts into applause, offering blessings to the royal couple, unaware of the turmoil unfolding inside. While the celebration continues, Theodora lies unconscious on the palace floor, surrounded by worried attendants and a frantic Theodore. Later that night, Theodora lies in her bed within the Calix imperial castle, her body racked with pain. Her hand clutches her chest as waves of agony ripple through her. She gasps for breath, the pain so intense it feels like her heart is being crushed from within. Desperate and barely conscious, Theodora reaches out into the darkness, silently begging for someone, anyone, to help her. Her plea is answered as a radiant figure descends. Valois, the ethereal being who once guided her, appears once again, calling her a foolish one as he gently lifts her from the edge of collapse. Valois scolds her lightly, saying that if she had an aura core, she should have just said so. Theodora, dazed and overwhelmed, barely manages to whisper his name in confusion. As he speaks, a surge of energy begins to separate from her, the space around them shimmering with celestial light. Valois calmly informs her that he has removed the divine power core from her body, assuring her that she should be fine now. However, he warns that there will be questions later, and he fully intends to get answers. With that, his presence begins to fade, leaving behind a trail of light and a lingering sense of awe. Theodora slowly awakens, her body no longer in pain. She glances around and realizes she's been moved to her bedroom. She wonders if Theodore carried her here. Just then, the door bursts open and Cassandra rushes in, calling out to her sister with relief and urgency. Cassandra kneels beside the bed, frantically asking if Theodora is hurt. Theodora reassures her that she's okay, though her voice is still weak. Cassandra exhales in relief, then breaks down, confessing how scared she was. Her voice trembles with emotion as she clutches her sister's hand. Theodora reflects on how close she came to never waking up again. She turns to Cassandra and softly apologizes for making her worry. Just then, the door swings open and Theodora bursts in, breathless and clearly shaken by the sight of her awake. Theodora rushes to her side and quickly asks if she's just woken up, if she's in pain, and if her injured shoulder is all right. Theodora nods and assures him that she's fine. He exhales deeply, visibly relieved, and murmurs his thanks to the heavens. Cassandra and Theodora exchange confused glances as Theodore hovers protectively nearby. In a lighthearted moment, Theodora teases that Theodore isn't acting like himself, but the mood shifts as she looks down at her hands and quietly asks why she collapsed in the first place. As she reflects, Theodora pieces it together. Her body contains both an aura core and a divine power core. These two forces clashed violently within her, causing her collapse, but that also means something incredible. She finally manifested aura. Her eyes widen with joy as she realizes all her grueling training has finally paid off. Theodora recalls the moment her powers awakened, while she was protecting her loved ones. A knock interrupts her thoughts, and the door opens to reveal Knight Commander Rashid Cavell. He announces that he heard the princess had awakened and came immediately. The room falls silent as everyone recognizes the legendary swordmaster. Standing tall in his ornate uniform, Rashid Cavell is introduced as the strongest swordmaster on the continent. Theodora gazes at him with awe, unable to believe she's meeting someone she had only heard about in rumors. Her eyes light up with admiration as she clasps her hands together, clearly starstruck. Rashid wastes no time and asks Theodora about the assassination attempt. Theodora tries to intervene, worried she's still recovering, but she stops him. She sits upright and calmly says it's okay, this is a serious matter, and she's ready to talk. Theodora tells Rashid he can ask her anything. He bows slightly and thanks her, then asks if it's true she knew about the assassination plan beforehand. She nods and begins to explain that on the day of the wedding, she had gone into town for an inspection. She recounts how she overheard a suspicious conversation about assassination and remembered the individuals involved because of how strange they looked. Rashid presses her, asking why she didn't report it immediately. Before she can answer, Theodore steps forward and takes the blame, calling it his fault. Lillian softly calls out to Theodore, but he's lost in thought. He remembers how Theodora had warned him before the ceremony, her voice serious and urgent, but he had ignored her warning, brushing it aside. Now the weight of that mistake presses heavily on him. Theodore admits aloud that the fault lies with him. Rashid sighs and runs a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. For a prince of the empire to make such a mistake, he says, is truly disgraceful. Theodore lowers his gaze, unable to argue. Rashid continues, saying that if they had prepared in advance, Theodora wouldn't have been hurt. He calls their failure truly shameful, but before he can say more, Theodora suddenly interrupts, shouting for them to wait. Theodora stands and insists that she's also at fault. She explains that in the heat of the moment she panicked and probably spoke incoherently. On top of that, her past actions had already damaged the trust between her and Theodore, making it harder for him to believe her warning. Theodore quietly admits that he hadn't earned her trust, and that's on him. Rashid nods, accepting her words. He says that if Her Highness insists, then he won't argue. But first and foremost, she needs rest. With that, he bows slightly and takes his leave, giving the room a moment to breathe. As Rashid Cavell turns to leave, Theodora Calix quickly steps forward and calls out to him, asking him to wait. She explains that there's something she still wants to ask. Rashid pauses, giving her his attention. Meanwhile, Theodore Dorzen remains behind in the now quiet room, standing alone as the door closes in front of him, the weight of the previous conversation still lingering. As Theodore steps into the hallway, one of the soldiers approaches and asks if he's all right. He brushes it off, saying he's fine and they can continue. But behind him, a few others murmur among themselves, admitting they thought Her Highness was faking again. They mention this isn't the first time something like this has happened and wonder if it was intentional. Theodore's expression hardens. He cuts them off sharply, telling them to stop immediately. Theodore turns back and reminds them that Theodora is still a princess, ordering them to watch their mouths. The soldiers quickly apologize, caught off guard by his stern tone. As he walks away, his mind spins. Their words weren't anything new, so why did it make him so furious? He wonders why it left him feeling so filthy, like he had betrayed something important. In the aftermath of the wedding incident, the assassins responsible for the attempted murder of the Emperor and Empress were sentenced to death. Though there were several suspicious elements surrounding the case, the investigation concluded with unusual speed. Still, the Empire deemed execution to be the appropriate punishment. Back in the training yard, Theodora grips her sword as a radiant energy surges through her. She swings with precision, and a brilliant aura flares to life around her blade. She realizes with excitement that she has finally awakened her aura. Elated, she exclaims that this is exactly the feeling she had been chasing. Theodora watches her performance and quietly remarks that it's impressive. Theodora glances at him, annoyed. Ever since the incident, under orders from her brother in Beskaya, law, he's been following her around like a shadow. She wonders to herself who he thinks he is, praising her like that, and calls his name with suspicion. She asks if he's bored and suggests he can go somewhere else. He immediately replies that he's not bored at all. Her irritation fades into a laugh, caught off guard by his sincerity. He then addresses her more formally, calling her Your Highness, his tone soft but serious. Just as Theodore gathers the courage to speak, Rashid Cavell arrives at the training yard. Theodora turns to greet him with a bright smile, asking if he came looking for Theodore, but Rashid shakes his head, saying he came to speak with her instead. Rashid smiles warmly and says he came to speak with Her Highness. He brings up the wedding day, recalling how she threw herself in front of their majesties to protect them. Theodora hesitates, then admits the truth. She acted because she knew what was going to happen. She knew the future. Rashid explains that most people would have frozen in panic, but she acted without hesitation. That day, he saw the potential of a knight in her. With that, he formally invites her to join the Dorzen Knights, offering her a place among their ranks. Theodora considers the offer carefully. It's a good opportunity, and learning Dorzen military tactics would be useful if she ever returned to her original world. But despite the benefits, she hesitates. Even with the peace treaty in place, she's still the Princess of Calix, and that carries political complications. She wonders aloud if it would really be acceptable for her to join the Dorzen Knights, imagining the scrutiny she might face. Rashid pauses thoughtfully, then offers an alternative solution to navigate the political tension. Rashid proposes that she attend Prince Theodore's personal training sessions instead. That way, she won't clash with other knights or create the appearance of an official affiliation. He adds that his private instruction won't be misinterpreted politically. Then he turns to Theodore, asking what he thinks of the arrangement. Theodora imagines the two of them training together, just the two of them. Rashid clears his throat and asks Theodore for his answer. Theodore responds with a stiff nod, saying he has no objections. Theodora beams with excitement, thrilled to be training under Rashid. He humbly says the honor is his, and she eagerly asks if she can start tomorrow. Theodora is all smiles, clearly excited for what's to come. But Theodore can't help but feel invisible beside her, thinking to himself that he doesn't even register in her eyes. As she walks ahead, full of energy, he lingers behind, silently watching her go. A child nearby shouts that she looks so cool. Theodora thanks them with a smile and announces that she'll be back soon. As she heads toward the training grounds, Theodore calls out to her from behind, trying to catch her attention. As she walks, Theodora notices a strange cat sitting calmly in the courtyard. The cat suddenly speaks, calling her a dumb human and asking if she forgot anything. She freezes, stunned, and wonders what's with this pig-like creature. The cat indignantly insists it's no pig. Theodora shouts in disbelief that the cat is talking. The creature smugly replies that it's obvious. As it begins to glow with magical energy, it declares that it is no ordinary cat, causing the air around them to shimmer with divine power. Theodora senses the divine energy radiating from the cat and realizes it must be Valois. He confirms her guess and tells her to listen closely. He begins explaining the time-stopping ability he granted her, warning that it must be used carefully. Valois explains that the time-stopping ability belongs to the domain of divine energy. Even though he granted it to her, overusing it as a human is extremely dangerous. He's been watching from above and warns her that she'll likely need to use it again soon. Valois offers to teach her how to properly control divine energy, saying it'll save them both trouble in the future. Before she can respond, Theodore appears and calls out to her. He asks what she's doing and then blinks in confusion, asking if she's seriously talking to cats now. Theodora awkwardly laughs and says she just saw a cat on her way to training. Theodora tells her not to be late and to hurry up. She waves goodbye to Valois, who responds with a cheerful NYA, and then jogs off to catch up with Theodora. As they walk together, Theodora asks how long training usually lasts. Theodora says it's usually about an hour, but isn't sure for today. Before she can finish her sentence, a voice calls out. Gillian Yohak suddenly appears, calling Theodora by his nickname Theo. Gillian Yohak rushes forward and calls out Theo's name again, grabbing his shoulder with a grin, clearly excited to see him. Theodora asks Gillian why he was coming from that direction. Another boy nearby mutters that he heard Gillian was in class with the delinquent princess. Gillian stiffens, clearly uncomfortable. Before things can get more awkward, Theodora steps in and formally introduces Gillian Yohak to Theodora Calix. Theodore formally introduces his friend, Gillian Yohak, the young master of House Yohak. Gillian greets Theodora Calix with a courteous tone, addressing her as Your Highness. She responds with a polite smile, acknowledging the introduction. But Gillian quickly shifts the mood, teasing her about training alongside Theodore, hinting that she must be thrilled to be alone with the boy she likes. Theodora remains composed, but the jab clearly lands. Theodore calls out Gillian's name, clearly caught off guard by the teasing. Gillian maintains a smug expression, pleased with his own joke. Theodore looks confused and unsure how to respond. Theodora calmly clarifies that she's not training with Theodore, but instead receiving personal lessons from Sir Rashid Cavell, shifting the conversation back to the matter at hand. Theodore signals the start of their training session, prompting Theodora and Gillian to follow. They march toward the training yard with purpose. As they arrive, Rashid Cavell greets them, noting with approval that everyone is on time. However, his expression shifts slightly when he spots Gillian among them, silently questioning what the young master of House Yohak is doing here. Gillian suddenly raises his voice, declaring that he wants to join the training session too. Rashid reminds him that he's already enrolled in the standard night training program. Gillian, however, insists on participating anyway. Turning to Theodora, Rashid asks for her permission, respecting her position as royalty. She smiles and agrees without hesitation, welcoming him to join them. Rashid remarks that Gillian's presence actually works out well. Before beginning the session, he explains that he wants to assess everyone's current abilities and suggests that Theodora spar with one of the others. Both Theodore and Gillian react with disbelief, and Gillian protests the idea of sparring with a princess who hasn't undergone formal training. He questions whether Rashid is overestimating her skill. Rashid calmly addresses Gillian, explaining that Theodora is not just any noblewoman, she has awakened her aura, a rare and powerful trait. Gillian still hesitates, but Theodora takes a moment to consider the situation. Rather than spar with her peers, she steps forward and requests to face Rashid himself, seeking to test her strength against the strongest fighter present. Gillian nervously warns Theodora about how fearsome Rashid can be in combat, and Theodore offers to take his place. But Theodora politely declines both of them. She explains that, since she's here to train, she wants to face the strongest opponent available. Rashid listens quietly, then acknowledges her resolve with a serious expression. Rashid gives a subtle smile and agrees to her request. The others watch with a mix of concern and anticipation. As he draws his sword, he warns Theodora to keep one thing in mind. He does not go easy on anyone, regardless of title or status. Theodora listens intently, her expression steady and focused. Rashid reiterates his stance, he never holds back. Theodora meets his gaze and smiles, unfazed by the warning. This is exactly what she came here for, a real challenge, one that will push her limits and prove her worth. Inside the circular sparring ring, Rashid and Theodora take their positions. A crowd of trainees and knights gathers around, forming a wide perimeter. All eyes are on the two fighters, as tension builds in the air. Some of the trainees murmur in confusion, asking what's going on. Gillian answers that Princess Theodora is about to spar with Commander Rashid. As the realization spreads, the crowd grows more attentive. Theodora stands tall at the center of the ring, gripping her sword tightly. She reflects briefly, preparing herself for what's to come. Rashid tells her that she's only the second person who's ever dared to challenge him. Curious, Theodora asks who the first was. He smirks and tells her to beat him first if she wants to know. As he raises his blade, her eyes widen in recognition. There's something familiar and dangerous about that sword. Theodora recognizes the weapon in Rashid's hand. It's Cezanne, the famed sword of legend. Cezanne is no ordinary blade. The moment it's drawn, it absorbs massive amounts of aura from its wielder and surroundings. Even holding it is restricted to those with exceptional control. Because of its nature, Cezanne's destructive potential is unmatched, feared even among seasoned warriors. Theodora steadies her breathing and reminds herself to stay calm. She raises her sword, eyes locked on her opponent. With a determined voice, she declares the start of the match. This is her moment to prove herself. The clash begins. Rashid moves with practiced ease, his strikes clean and precise. Theodora meets him head on, her stance firm and her blade moving with growing confidence. Rashid remains composed, evaluating her technique, while she pushes forward with fierce determination. Theodora lunges with a burst of speed, forcing Rashid to parry. The crowd gasps, surprised by her agility. Jillian and Theodora watch in stunned silence as she continues her assault, dashing across the ring with relentless energy. After blocking several of Rashid's strikes, Theodora realizes something is wrong. Her aura is nearly gone. She looks down at her sword, understanding that Cezanne has drained her energy faster than expected. Rashid calmly states that her aura reserves are almost empty, and this next move will likely be her final attack. Rashid channels his aura, preparing for a decisive blow. Across the ring, Theodora tightens her grip and steadies her stance. Even if she's about to lose, she refuses to back down. She'll fight to the very end. With a final cry of determination, Theodora charges forward. Their blades collide in a powerful clash, sparks flying from the impact. Rashid holds firm, but his grip tightens as he absorbs the force of her last strike. The duel reaches its climax in a single, thunderous exchange. Exhausted, Theodora drops to one knee, her sword slipping from her grasp. Rashid lowers his weapon and offers a respectful nod, telling her it was a good spar. She smiles and thanks him, acknowledging his strength. Watching from the sidelines, Gillian stares in awe, clearly impressed by her performance. Later, Rashid enters a quiet study where Theodore and Cassandra are waiting. Theodore asks how Theodora performed. Rashid answers without hesitation, just as expected. He explains that the princess appears to have been born with a natural talent for the sword. Cassandra gasps in surprise, asking if he really means they're Theodora. Rashid confirms it, saying her movements were like those of a seasoned knight. Theodore skeptically asks if Rashid is just being polite because she's his sister. Rashid laughs and assures him that's not the case. After all, it was Theodora who challenged him first. Rashid continues, saying that watching Theodora reminded him of the Emperor's early days. Theodore groans, knowing what's coming. Rashid recounts how Theodora once challenged him and got completely wrecked. Cassandra giggles at the memory, clearly charmed by the story. Theodore buries his face in his hands, mortified. Rashid reflects on Theodora's competitive spirit, whether during the wedding ceremony or in training. He believes she's destined to become an excellent knight. Her performance has already earned the admiration of her peers. He adds that her presence will also serve as a strong motivator for Prince Theodore, who listens with a sheepish smile. Standing in the study of Calix Imperial Castle, Rashid Cavell formally addresses Cassandra Calix, requesting permission for something significant. With a composed expression and hand over his heart, he respectfully asks Her Majesty to allow him one request. His words carry weight as he reveals his intention to take Her Highness, Theodora Calix, with him on the upcoming monster subjugation mission. Theodora listens intently, her eyes lighting up with determination at the prospect of joining the operation. In the training yard of Calix Imperial Castle, Rashid gathers the assembled trainees and announces the purpose of their meeting, the upcoming monster subjugation. The group listens with mixed reactions, but one voice rises above the rest. Theodora can barely contain her excitement, thrilled at the chance for real combat. She clenches her fist with anticipation, eager to prove herself on the battlefield. As murmurs ripple through the trainees, some grumble about the sudden announcement, already feeling the weight of their training. Rashid immediately silences the chatter with a firm command. He reminds them that while drills are important, nothing prepares a knight better than real combat. Theodora stands quietly among them, absorbing every word with focused attention. Rashid continues his briefing, explaining that no amount of training can match the lessons learned in an actual battle. He asks if anyone objects, and the trainees quickly shout their compliance. He proceeds to describe the enemy, monsters known as enkandu. Though small in size, they are fiercely aggressive and rarely act alone. Their tendency to move in coordinated groups makes them a serious threat despite their appearance. Rashid elaborates that when enkandu populations swell, they become a menace to nearby villages, swarming in and causing chaos. He urges the trainees to see this as a rare opportunity to gain real experience. Theodora beams with gratitude, thrilled for the chance to participate. Theodore Dorzen, standing beside her, asks if she truly intends to go. Without hesitation, she confirms, of course she is. Theodore hesitates, visibly uneasy about the mission. Theodora turns to him and asks if he's planning to join. He answers with a reluctant yes, saying he has no choice. She scoffs playfully, calling him annoying. Then, shifting her focus, she approaches Rashid with a request of her own. Theodora asks Rashid if he could accompany her to speak with her sister, worried she might not be able to get permission on her own. Rashid chuckles warmly and reassures her that there's no need. He already secured Cassandra Calix's approval. Theodora blinks in surprise, not expecting her sister to have agreed so easily. Rashid explains that after hearing about Theodora's natural talent and recent performance, Cassandra was pleased and gave her blessing. Theodora accepts the news with a soft smile and thanks Rashid for going out of his way. He brushes off the gratitude, saying it was nothing. Theodora quietly observes the exchange, clearly relieved. Later, Theodora walks through the castle grounds, humming contentedly. She reflects on how her training has been paying off, feeling stronger with each passing day. Her routine of daily sword drills has become second nature. Suddenly, she hears her name and turns to see Theodore approaching. Theodore asks why she's following him, and she counters by asking if he's going to train. When he doesn't answer directly, she presses him. In a surprising move, he takes her hand and says he'll go with her. Theodora stares at him, confused by the sudden shift in attitude. Theodore looks at her with resolve and admits he wants to become stronger too, just like her. His words hang in the air as the breeze stirs the leaves. Theodora is caught off guard, her expression shifting from surprise to flustered silence. He calls out to her again, unsure of her reaction. Clearing her throat, Theodora tells him she appreciates the sentiment, but has something else to do today. When Theodore asks why, she brings up the assassin currently imprisoned in the dungeon. She wants to interrogate him herself. There's something about the incident that she needs to understand firsthand. She explains that to do so, she'll need to ask her brother-in-law for help in secret. But before she can walk away, Theodore grabs her hand and stops her. He tells her there's no need for backdoor favors. If she wants in, she should just come with him. As the Prince of Dorzen, he can get her access without issue. Theodore leads Theodora toward the dungeon with quiet determination. The stone tower looms ahead, guarded by armored sentries. As the pair approach, the guards immediately recognize them, His Highness the Prince and Her Highness the Princess, and prepare to let them through. At the entrance, a guard asks what brings them to the dungeon. Theodore answers that they've come to see the recently captured assassin. Without question, the guard nods and offers to guide them personally. The torches lining the stone corridor flicker as the group descends deeper into the prison. Side by side, Theodore and Theodora stand in the dim corridor of the dungeon, their expressions resolute. They've come not just to confront a prisoner, but to uncover the truth behind the attack that changed everything.